what are you guys like? Obviously, the goal of Project Purple is not only raising awareness. I know you guys do a lot of financial stuff as
Yeah.
well, like donating to research. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about like
Yeah.
what Project Purple does, kind of on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, and these are two pillars that have been with us since day one. So when we started the charity, we wanted to help patients through that journey. And so we realized like we could do that. How do we do that? Like, what does that look like, right? And I go back to my personal experience. Like, my dad had insurance, he had retirement. A lot of people don't, right? You just saw that every day. Like, I give you that example. Like, that guy had no support, right? And so we were like, hey, let's step in, let's help people financially because, the cost of cancer and, now fast forward 13 years, there was just a great article. I think it was like in the New York Times, and it was talking about the toxicity of cancer care. And, I had a guy on our podcast, he kept every single bill and he goes, Dino, I'm alive today because I have great insurance. I'm like, Dan, what are you talking about? He's like, I kept every single bill. I paid $20,000 out of pocket. My total bills totaled 2.1 million.
Holy shit,
So he's like,
that's insane.
if I didn't have good insurance and a good job, I would be dead because insurance paid for, 95% of all my bills and I got great care. So like it's crazy, right? But this is the United States and it's a great country. It's not perfect. But if you don't have really good insurance, sometimes the quality of care or access to care really becomes an issue. So I saw that personally, like I said, being there with my dad, but
Yeah.
also realizing that my dad, again, he had good insurance, he had Medicaid, which was like secondary. So like we were good there, but other people aren't. So I said, hey, let's impact people in a positive way because this cancer is so negative and nasty. A lot of people, once they get sick, they can't work anymore because they're so sick, like from the treatments or the cancer itself. So how the hell are they going to keep their lights on? How are they going to put food on the table? So, we rolled out this patient financial aid program. Since inception, we've paid over $1 million. We've helped over 1,000 people nationwide. Anyone in the country
Wow.
who's battling can apply for it. This year was an exciting year because we actually evolved into providing food for patients. So now, if you live on the East Coast, we found a partner up in Boston, but they supply food from prepared, healthy, nutritious meals from Maine all the way down to Florida, as far west as Ohio. So we're excited now because nutrition is such an important piece of people battling cancer. But also, like, think about it, and this was comes back to a little bit about the patient financial aid program. I always said people should focus on getting better and spending time with the people they love the most. If you're sick and you got to work, you're not really doing that. And so, because you're focused on the, hey, I got to pay the bills. So that's, again, we come in and then trying to cook food and trying to go out and get food, again, takes time away from focusing on what people should be focusing during that time. I honestly feel, and this is like, in hopefully society, maybe we get to this, that everyone who gets sick with cancer, you should just get a reprieve. Like you get a reprieve from your bills, you get a reprieve from, cooking, doing all, and just focus on you getting better and fighting cancer and being with your loved ones. Imagine if, like, as a society, we did that for everyone. A, I think we'd have better outcomes, but two, I think we'd be a much better society, right? Like in terms of how people react. So that was kind of like a little bit of, why we do what we do on the patient financial aid side. And then the other program that's been with us since day one, it's really kind of heated up over the last couple of years because of the amount of money we've raised is research. And we always knew from the very beginning, I knew looking at the numbers, like there was nothing being funded in research. And a lot of people don't know this, but excuse me, cancer research in the United States, 85% of it is funded by the government. So Uncle Sam supports the majority of
Oh
cancer
wow.
research, which is great. It's good that they do that. Don't get me wrong. But the bad thing is, like, if you look at pancreatic cancer, and I'm gonna compare it to breast cancer because that's what most people do. Not that I want to be like most people, but as I mentioned, my mom's a two-time breast cancer survivor, so she's alive today because of those advancements. Breast cancer is now, I think, there's about 350,000 people in the United States that get diagnosed with breast cancer. So it's a big number. They get about $1 billion from the government for basic research. Pancreatic cancer impacts about 65,000 people a year, so much less number, only gets about 125 million, but is the
Oh
second
wow.
in most state in all of New England. Nationwide, it's the third leading killer of all major cancers. In New England, it's number two, and by 2030, which is not that far off here, and maybe even sooner, it will become the number two killer of all the major cancers. So a billion to 125 is a big spread. So that's the challenging piece. If 85% comes from that 125, that's not a lot of money. So now what happens is you rely on philanthropy, right? You rely on people and groups to fund a lot of the heavy research. And so we've been really invested in that since day one. But the first couple of years we were just trying to make money, be profitable, help a lot of patients. So really we didn't start donating until we donated a little bit in the very beginning, but it just wasn't the sums that we've been doing over the last 5 years. But now our research portfolio is over $3 million, kind of getting close to 4 million. So we're like at 3.5 right now
Wow.
with some of the recent grants that we've made. But a lot of the heavy lift, like in the last like 5 years, we've donated probably about 3 million of that number within the last 5 years, because that's really been our growth where we've kind of exceeded $1 million years and just have had really great participants and supporters of our mission over the last couple of years. It's really grown. And so the research, though, Jeremy, is really where we're trying to make an inroad in early detection, because we do know right now the sooner that people get diagnosed, the higher the odds of survivability and better quality of life. Unfortunately, right now, statistically, 75% are diagnosed stage 3 or greater, which is not a great statistic. So we're trying to change that, and try to find and help researchers with early detection, finding new modalities, possibly, tests that, could be, a key towards early detection, or screening protocols. We've been heavily invested in like high risk screening, because there is a risk for people with genetics. Like that's the one thing I think that's really changed the game a bit in the last 5 years is genetics. Like a lot of people have, as science as a whole, this is not just pancreatic cancer, but we start to learn more and more about science and genes. There are certain cancers that come from genetic predispositions, and pancreatic cancer is one of them. It's a big enough percentage where I think people need to know their risk, I guess is the term I'll use. Anywhere between 5 and 10% of the cases in the United States come from some sort of genetic risk.
Hmm.
So if you know your genetic markup or makeup, then I always, knowledge is power. Like that can be very powerful in getting screening and surveillance, so that when you go to your general practitioner, they're aware of this high risk. And, having a vague sign and symptom like lower back pain or diarrhea for 2 weeks, but having a higher risk for pancreatic cancer, that light bulb should go off and say, okay, let's investigate this further to make sure it's not pancreatic cancer.